listening to Rootbound, a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside.
Are you pining for something evergreen? Then spruce up your life with conifers. Conifers, they're unforgettable!
Hello everyone, thank you for listening to this episode of Rootbound. I am the host of the show. My name is Steve, and Rootbound is the podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside, and each week I invite a guest who joins me on the show to share with us all about a plant that means something to them, and then I share with a guest about a plant that means something to me, and through this process we can all learn more about plants and learn more about each other. Now today we have another repeat guest, someone's been on the show a few times before, but before we say hi to them again, I want to talk about genuses that are named after people. Now, I did this a few episodes ago, if you've been listening. I named a bunch of common genuses that are actually named after people, like Magnolia is named after some dude named Magnol. But one thing that you might have noticed in that list is that they were all men. and that was like, you know, when plants were being named, like back in the day, Carl Linnaeus era, like, you know, that was the time, and it's like pretty messed up because lots of women have made lots of contributions to botany, even during that time. They just weren't recognized. So I thought today I would name some women who have genuses of plants named after them, and you know, maybe a word to those responsible for naming plant genuses. Maybe we have a moratorium on naming them after dudes for a little while, because when I was trying to research this, it was a little bit harder than I expected. But there's actually a good number, and I'm going to just list 4 here that I thought were pretty interesting. First, we have Mary Agnes Chase, who was a self-taught botanist who did a lot of work on grasses for the USDA and the Smithsonian. And there are 2 genera, excuse me. I've been saying genuses this whole time, but the correct plural for genus is genera. And there are 2 genera named after Mary Agnes Chase, which are Agnesia and Chasecloa, both grasses. Then I read about a Brazilian botanist who is relatively contemporary. She passed away in 2003. Her name was Graciela Barroso, and there are 3 genera named after Graciela Barroso. Gracieleanthus in the Monimaceae family, Gracielia in the Astraceae family, and Gracieliodendron in the Fabaceae family. I'm always bad at pronouncing those things. Then we have Alice Eastwood, and she is credited with building the botanical collection at the California Academy of Sciences, and she published a ton of stuff about plants in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and there are 2 genera named after Alice Eastwood. One is called Aliciella, and the other one is called Eastwoodia. Aliciella is in the Phlox family, and Eastwoodia is in the Asteraceae family. And then finally, we have Mildred Mathias, who is a professor at UCLA, and actually the Botanic Gardens at UCLA are named after Mildred Mathias. And the genus of plant named after her is in the Apiaceae family, and it is called Mathiasella.
Dr. Mathias earned an academic appointment in the 1950s, becoming one of the few women faculty members at UCLA.
I've never thought particularly about being a woman in the field. I've just always gone ahead and done what I wanted to do.
Hey, Anwesha, thanks for joining me on this episode of Rootbound.
Hi, Steve.
Just audience, for a little context, we're recording in person, which is a rarity, which is fun. You'll remember Anwesha from a bunch of episodes, including episode 6, but a bunch of the season episodes. Also in the room is Muggsy the dog, who was on a winter episode, so if you hear some snorting and stuff, that's who that is, maybe some jingling of a collar. Also, Carla's in the room here, so you might hear her giggle, perhaps. And then in another room, our baby is sleeping, and so if she wakes up crying, we might have to stop down. So just all those caveats for when you record in person and can't control the audio soundscape. But with that said, Anwesha, do you have a plant to share with us today?
Yes, I do.
Which plant is it?
It is the Ranunculus.
Okay, you said that earlier, and I was like, that sounds like a monster. Oh no, the Ranunculus.
Or like a disease or something.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
like
he
the
got
ranunculus
ranunculus.
is spreading.
Oh, gosh. He got ranunculus.
It's actually a flower.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually my favorite flower.
Oh, cool.
So it's actually quite pretty. But yeah, I mean, should I go ahead and jump into some fun
Let's
facts,
start
or?
maybe with why it's meaningful to you. Like, why is it your favorite flower?
Okay.
What can you tell me about your connection to the ranunculus?
Well, I just like really love the look of it. It's a lot. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's kind of like a rose, but it's a lot more densely packed petals, like really thickly stacked petals, and they usually are sold when they're very closed or even completely a ball, kind of like a peony, where it's like that marshmallow stage. And then as they bloom, they spread open like sort of one petal by petal. And I read online there's about like 120 petals per flower. So it's very lush looking and very pretty. And they come in all different colors of the rainbow. So that's really nice for floral arrangements. I just really love how they look in arrangements. I prefer them to the rose, which I feel like is a little bit...
On the nose?
Yeah. And also I am trying my hand at growing them this year from corms. So they're also like personally affecting me right now because I'm trying to get them to grow and bloom in my garden.
Are you having any luck growing them in your garden?
Yeah. So this is my second year of trying to grow them, and I have finally gotten a couple of blooms. So
Cool.
I've gotten about 3 blooms so far, but they were very beautiful, so I'm hoping for more.
Very, very cool. I think like maybe you posted a picture of those on your social media. Is that what it was? A ranunculus?
Yep.
Okay.
It was a ranunculus,
Yeah, definitely
a bright red one.
prettier than it sounds.
Yeah. Well, there's another name for it, which is the buttercup.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting now because buttercup I know of like little yellow flower.
Little yellow flowers. So it's the same. This is getting into my research.
Sure,
but
yes.
This is they're the same family, which is the Ranunculaceae.
Are they family or genus?
Genus, sorry.
Same genus. Okay.
Same genus, the Ranunculus genus, or and then the Ranunculaceae family.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
And so the yellow ones are the ones that are known as the buttercup. They have fewer petals, at least from what I saw online. They have like 5 or 6 petals. The ones I'm growing are like the more floral arrangement-y kind, which are multiple colors and lots of petals.
Yeah, and the buttercups I know are smaller. Remember we saw some when we were in Switzerland.
Oh,
Remember,
okay,
like
those were the buttercups?
Yeah, because there's that trick that you put it up to your chin, and make it
yeah.
look like you have butter on your chin. I don't know, that's a weird kid thing, but it works. Like the way they reflect the light is very.
Yeah.
Because they have, I guess they have like this like parabolic shape.
Yes. So actually, I found this in some of my research that ranunculus have very flat petals. The cells of the petals lay flat like a mirror, so they reflect back UV light a lot better than most flowers, which are a bit corrugated, like on a microscopic level, so they don't reflect light back as well. So ranunculus, for that reason, their colors look a lot more vivid and reflective because they're just sort of flashing the sunlight back. And that also led to the children's game where you hold a buttercup up to your chin, and apparently the lore is that if it reflects bright yellow on your chin, it means you love butter.
Okay.
So, like, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't know that whether you love butter or not, but I guess you can hold up a buttercup flower to see if you love butter.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense because it's like reflecting that yellow light back stronger than another flower would because of the shape of the cells. So cool. That's so cool. Fascinating. All right, let's talk corms.
Yes.
Corms is kind of a funny word. It sounds like you're mispronouncing corn when someone says corm. It's C-O-R-M. But I talked about them I talked about all those underground parts of plants in the intro of an episode a while ago, and I don't really remember specifically what's the deal with corms. So what's the deal with corms?
Well, I can't say I'm an expert on corms, but I looked it up, and like a corm is, I mean, it's an underground part of the plant, first of all. So it's sort of like, we've all sort of maybe heard of tubers or bulbs and rhizomes. And so corms is another kind of underground part of a plant. My understanding is that it's homogeneous inside. So there, if you cut a corm in half, you're not going to see multiple layers. And that's what you see in a bulb. So a bulb is a compressed version of the stem and leaves of a plant. So like an onion where you cut in, you see all the layers. A corm is not like that. It's I guess, sort of starchy all the way through. It's not a tuber though, and I'm not sure why.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
But yeah, so ranunculus corms actually, it's funny you mentioned that it sounds like a monster because they kind of look like monsters. Ranunculus corms are really weird looking. They look like an octopus. So there's a lot of little tentacles sticking out.
Oh.
It looks really kind of ugly. And then you soak them in water. You plant them upside down, like tentacle parts down.
Okay.
And those are the parts that start rooting. And then the plant comes out of the top.
Interesting. Very fascinating. And I
But
guess
you should add more on corms if you...
yeah, well, our audience, if you know about corms, feel free to fill in with some corm info because I don't really know much about corms. I think I'm trying to think of any of like the spring flowers I have. Dandelion, or I mean,
Most of them are bulbs.
daffodils are bulbs, I think, right?
They're bulbs.
What about hyacinth? Are those also
I think
bulbs?
hyacinth might
Maybe
be a
corm?
corm.
Interesting. Well, we could speculate about corms all day.
Yeah.
But what other fun facts and dazzling details do you have about?
Well, another
Ranunculus?
fun nickname. So I was surprised to find there's so many names. So there's Buttercup, and there's also Coyote Eyes.
Oh.
Which comes from a Native American folklore story that a coyote was, I guess, out in a field, got bored, and was tossing around his own eyeballs in the air. So he took them out and started tossing them around, catching them because it was fun. And then an eagle caught the eyeballs and just stole them and left. And the coyote was left in a field with no eyeballs. So he picked up some buttercups and stuck them in his eyes, and so it's called coyote eyes. And I've actually, I think, seen a photo, like sort of like a painting of coyote with yellow flower eyes. So if you've ever seen that Native American imagery, that's what it's actually a ranunculus.
And I wonder if that has to do with the reflective quality of them as well, right? Because like an animal eye at night, or if the sun hits it at the right angle, and maybe if you're like looking at a field of them, you're like, where's the coyote in there?
Yeah. So that was kind of cool. Other fun.
Just to note, don't play with your eyeballs, or you might get
don't
them
do
stolen
that.
by an eagle.
Don't do that. Don't
Yeah.
stick them in your eyes
Yeah.
or anywhere else because apparently they're toxic.
Okay.
So that's another fun, not so fun fact. But like, if you're handling ranunculus, be careful. They're pretty toxic, can cause like a contact dermatitis in people. And
really?
some GI issues in animals that eat them.
Oh.
So cows avoid them apparently, almost notoriously. But they said in some cases where all the grass has died out and there's only buttercups left in a large field, cows have eaten them out of desperation and gotten kind of sick.
Oh, interesting.
So.
Have you ever gotten a contact dermatitis from handling them?
No, I haven't.
Interesting. Okay.
And I've gotten bouquets before, and now I've obviously planted them, and I think it's fine as long as you're not like eating parts of it.
Good.
What else? They are. Oh, another interesting fact about them is So when I got them in bouquets, I really loved the shape of them in particular because they're sort of, like I said, like a peony. They come in this ball shape. They slowly open up, and they're not fully fanned out like a flower for several days. So for a long time, they're almost like a cup shape with these densely packed petals all around. And then I planted the corms, and I started growing them. And I was kind of sad the first day because when my first ranunculus bloomed, it bloomed completely opened up. And, it's in the pollen, like the pistils and the stamen were like fully exposed. The petals were fully splayed out. And I wondered why that is because I had never seen that before when I get them in a cut flower arrangement. And then I noticed the next morning it was closed again. It was closed like how I would see in a flower arrangement. So when I was doing research for today's episode, I found out that they're heat sensitive. So they actually open up in the heat and then they close back up in the cold, and so they're pretty frost tolerant for that reason because they protect heat, and apparently they provide a nice home for insects trying to stay warm and out of the cold as well. So insects will sort of crawl into the center of them and then they close up and protect them from heat cold in the wintertime.
Interesting.
But yeah, they've been used for medicinal uses. They're actually apparently from Asia, which I had no idea because I've never seen them whenever I've been to Asia. I've really only seen those.
But is that, I guess, we're talking about a specific species that's from Asia, because there are some, I guess, buttercups native in this area, but maybe the one that's most common in flower arrangements, the bigger, because the one you have is bigger than a buttercup, right? Like
it's bigger than a buttercup. It's still pretty small for a ranunculus, but I think that's because it's a smaller corm and it's just getting set up. They can get to be pretty big, like a rose sized. But yeah, they're apparently found along streams and along water bodies in southwestern Asia.
Interesting.
But yeah, and then the other thing is, it's, I don't know, when I heard it was called buttercup, it reminded me of Pucker Up Buttercup, which I had sort of forgotten about, so that was fun. But yeah, lots of fun stories. There's the children's story, the coyote story, and then there's also a story about a Persian prince who was really in love with this woman and sort of kept singing to her, and then they turned him into a buttercup because they were kind of annoyed of him singing, I guess.
There's a lot of like old myths about people getting turned into flowers as punishment.
It is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he turned into a buttercup.
Do you know anything about the name Ranunculus? Like, what does that mean?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I do. I was forgetting. So it's two Latin words, rana, which is a frog, and unculus, which is little.
Oh.
So it's little frog. And it's apparently comes from being growing along streams and small water bodies. So it's just like a dainty little nickname.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
Cute. Okay, that sounds good.
It's cuter than it sounds.
Yeah, indeed.
I'm called Little Buttercup, dear Little Buttercup, though I could never tell why. But still I'm called Buttercup, poor Little Buttercup, sweet Little Buttercup
Well, thank you for sharing about ranunculus with me. Do you mind if I share a plant with you?
Of course.
All right, we're going to go on a just a quick field trip. So grab Muggsy, put your shoes on. We're going to go outside for a second.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have slip-on shoes, right? We can.
Yes.
Good. All right, Muggsy, we're just going to a quick little field trip. We'll come back in a second because I have to get my notes, which are out there. All right. We're going out into the yard. This is a benefit of recording in person. We can actually go into the garden.
Come on, Mugs.
Now, I went out here earlier to try to find this particular plant, but it's so dry right now. I had a little bit of trouble, but I did find some, and they don't look quite as nice as they can. But I'm going to grab one. You can stay right there.
Okay.
I'm going to grab a few of these here. And here, I'm just picking a couple little of this plant before I reveal what it is, and I'm going to hand one to Anwesha. So here's the plant.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
It looks like a clover.
All right, good. You're describing it's got 3 leaves. Now, it is not a clover, and we'll talk about it in a second.
Okay.
Now, take a bite.
Take a bite?
Yeah, take a bite. What does it taste like?
Whoa. I don't know, but it was like an explosion of tart flavor.
Mm-hmm. Very tart.
Whoa, it's really
it's like
tart.
lemony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very lemony.
Yeah. So pretty cool. This is a plant that is called wood sorrel. Let's go ahead and go back inside.
Okay.
You can just toss the stem. The stems are not. The stems are edible. They're just like a little bit, especially now they're like getting a little bit.
Wow, that's actually kind of good. Like
Yeah.
it'd be a good garnish on like a, sort of fancy Michelin style dish.
Absolutely, it is a fun thing to add to food, particularly to salads. Though I will say, what makes them this wood sorrel is the common name. There's a bunch of species in the wood sorrel family. It's genus Oxalis.
Okay.
And that name oxalis comes from what makes them sour, which is oxalic acid. And if you read a lot of stuff about oxalic acid, people will say, well, oxalic acid is toxic. But it goes back to what we...
You're telling me this after you had me bite.
Totally. I ate some too, audience, if you didn't hear. And that's the thing, is like we've said on the podcast a lot, going back to our friend Paracelsus, the Swiss alchemist, the dose makes the poison, right? And if you eat too much of anything, it can be poisonous. Now, the thing is, like, oxalic acid is in a lot of food we eat. Like, it's in spinach.
Okay.
It's in a bunch of other things. The amount that is in wood sorrel is higher than a lot of foods, but it's not as high as in something like Oxalic acid is also what makes the plant Virginia creeper toxic, and it's way higher in that. And the problem with oxalic acid is also in rhubarb. And in fact, the rhubarb leaves have way higher oxalic acid than the stems, so that's why people don't eat the leaves of rhubarb. But the whole thing is like, essentially, if you had a ton of it, your kidneys wouldn't be able to process it, and that would make you sick. But in these small amounts, especially a little bite, no problem. A few leaves on a salad, no problem. But even then, like when I first heard about it, and one of the things I did with it is I made like a lemonade-like drink with it.
And you got sick?
No, I was fine.
Oh, you were
because
fine.
the thing is, you have to have a ton to make it, and the thing is, it's not really available in your yard that long. It would be very hard, I think, to be poisoned by wood sorrel. You'd have to like really go overboard.
Is it seasonal? You said it's not available.
Yeah, like this is kind of like, it kind of dies back in the summer because it's too hot. So, yeah, I think a lot of those things, it's like, yes, you don't want to have too much oxalic acid, but you probably wouldn't, if you like drank a lot of lemons and had so much citric acid, you probably would be not great for you.
Yeah.
I mean, anything is like that, but oxalic acid in particular is, so audience beware, don't go overboard with anything, but yes. It's not as big of a deal, I think, as people might say. Yeah, and it's got a lot of uses, culinary uses traditionally, and even it probably is in some Michelin star salads, I'm sure.
Yeah. It looks like it would be a nice little garnish with its shape too, clover-like.
Yeah. On the clover-like shape, it's pretty interesting. I think when I first remember seeing it, because the different species of it widespread all around, I think I confused it with clover, and I think a lot of people confuse it with clover. And you'll see it's pretty common. And interestingly, I was reading an article about the shamrock, which is, the symbol of Ireland. And the shamrock, I think, in Irish means little clover. But what exact species of plant the shamrock is it gets a little bit nebulous. And people have different interpretations. And at two different times, like I think once in like... Don't quote me on the dates, but like once in like the 40s and then once in the 90s, they did a survey of Ireland to say, what do you think the shamrock is?
Yeah.
Majority of people said it was little clover, but some percentage said that it was wood sorrel.
Oh, wow.
And there is some references to British people saying that Irish people ate clover or ate shamrock, but that might have been British people seeing that they were eating wood sorrel. 'Cause I think you can eat clover, but it's not really tasty and probably doesn't do much for you, but the wood sorrel is, so maybe... It was like outsiders observing and like, oh, that's the thing that they draw on all their stuff.
Yeah.
And they're eating something that looks similar and maybe there's a mix up. But there's some like interesting like historical confusion about what the shamrock is and its editability. But yeah, wood sorrel might be responsible for it because it does look quite similar. So audience, if you want to look it up, it's got 3 heart-shaped leaves in kind of a circular pattern. And what we just saw now, they kind of fold up on themselves when it gets really hot. Or at night they do that too, I guess. And sometimes when it rains they do that. So they have kind of this reactivity. So sometimes they will be kind of splayed out. Yeah, and Oxalis genus is pretty defined by that 3-leaf clover shape. There are, I guess, some other...
So are they related?
No, they're actually not related at all. They're very different plants. Actually, the clover is more like a legume-based grass, and this is kind of like a small... I don't know the definition of it, but it kind of grows up. It doesn't like spread in the like a grass. It kind of is like individual plants.
Oh, okay.
And so they're not in the same genus at all. Clover is... I'm blanking on the genus of clover, but this is Oxalis, and they're not the same at all.
Okay.
But they do look similar. The flowers are very different between clover. Clover has kind of a little
white,
puffy ball flower. This one has like their colors vary, but it's like this one I have here as a small yellow flower that's kind of got like, I think 5 petals, and they're small. I think this particular one, I was trying to figure this out earlier, I think this particular one is likely Oxalis Delaney, which is Delaney's Oxalis, and Delaney's named after some German dude named Johann Jacob Delanius. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast. I think Carl Linnaeus just named plants after every botany dude he could find. They're all dudes too. That's something I need to look up for another episode perhaps. It's like are there genuses named after women? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but... Yeah, so even though this particular one is native to North America, it's widespread around the world, but there are other wood sorrels. Like I think I've had wood sorrel in my yard of a different genus that is a European wood sorrel that has been spread around everywhere else. So it's very common. I think I read that there are wood sorrels on every continent except for Antarctica. Like it's a very common thing.
So if somebody wanted to go out and find it in their area, which presumably a lot of our listeners will probably have it nearby, like how would you distinguish it quickly from clover?
The leaves are heart-shaped, whereas clovers are more round leaves. And so if you look at the leaf of a wood sorrel, an individual leaf, it kind of looks like two leaves, like when you take a heart that's folded in half. They have that look, whereas clover is like these three kind of oval leaves. Yeah. So that's the main way to do it. Also, if you like Google how it looks as a plant and how the stems and stuff look, it is pretty different looking. And the flowers are also that I think there was a little bit of a yellow flower in one of the ones we just ate. But if they're flowering, you can totally tell the difference between a clover-like poof ball and this kind of like more standard flower
and
look.
Neither one of them, clover or wood sorrel, have 4 leaves, right? That's just like is that just a myth, the whole 4-leaf clover
Clovers
thing?
can have 4 leaves.
Okay.
But it's kind of like a random thing. That's why they're
like
rare.
A mutation, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And there are some. I haven't heard about wood sorrels like having 4 leaves. There are, I guess, some species of wood sorrel that have more than 3, but the majority of them have 3. You will see some. There are some ornamental oxalises you'll see around that have these cool like 3 leaves. There's one particular I see a lot that the leaves are more triangular instead of heart-shaped, but they're like 3 of them, and they're kind of a dark maroon. And there's a number of those oxalises that are ornamental, but the majority of the ones you see around are like what we saw, these smaller those ones have bigger leaves, like the ornamental ones. But the ones I see, at least in this part of the country around, are for like smaller leaves, like a clover. Let's talk about the name. So we talked about the scientific name oxalis is because of the oxalic acid, and then this particular one, Oxalis delaney, because of this dude, Johann Jacob Delaenius. But the name wood sorrel is interesting because there is another plant that's very common in gardens, particularly in France, called sorrel, and they are completely unrelated too. Sorrel is genus Rumex. This is genus Oxalis, but the name sorrel, the word sorrel is coming from French and Germanic roots. It's a little unclear, but it basically means sour, which you experienced.
That makes sense, yeah.
And the sorrel, the more common garden plant, is also sour. And whether they got named independently because they're both sour, or someone said, hey, this thing I found in the woods tastes like the one.
Yeah, the other sorrel.
I'm not sure, but it is called wood sorrel because it also commonly grows in the woods. So that's the name. And then I think a couple final things as far as how to use it. I made a lemonade essentially where you just like blend it with some water, added a sweetener, strain out the stuff, and there's some good recipes online. It makes a bright green drink, which is cool. Whoa. You need like a few handfuls of it. So like I think now it's too hot and dry now to have enough of it to do anything interesting. But then I was looking up some other recipes. A lot of people talk about making a simple syrup with it, which you could use for similar uses, which is cool. In salads would be good. You probably don't want to overdo it. I saw a really interesting recipe for a sorbet with wood sorrel, which would be pretty good. Probably just freezing the lemonade essentially. And then one place I saw a few places where people referenced, and I guess this is probably like a pretty traditional, just like camping fish recipe where you like stuff a fish with it and then cook it on the fire. Like you put a bunch of it, and then you get like
because you could probably pick it while you're out camping.
Right.
Yeah.
And you get like the lemony, fishy flavor, but you're somewhere where you can't access a lemon.
Get lemon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So if I'm ever doing that, I'll give it a try.
Fisherman's recipe.
Yeah. And then the final thing to say would be the seed pods are pretty cool. They kind of look like micro okra, I would say. They're very small, but they also have a very nice tart pop when you eat them, and they're kind of like a nice little snacky thing. You can take them and pop them in your mouth, and they like pop when you bite them. They have a nice little tart flavor, but like right now we're past that part of the year, so I couldn't see any of those. I saw some dry ones out there, but they don't look as cool. But yeah, they're like very tiny, like less than an inch long, but do kind of look like an okra.
Huh. I love okra. So.
Yeah. I think that's it. What I have to say about wood sorrel, it's meaningful to me because it's in my yard and I've used it a few times, and I should do more with it. It's a fun little
And does the plant get any bigger than that, or it sort of stays?
It stays low. You'll get a bigger one where it kind of like will spread out. It may get a little taller, but the leaves and stuff never get any bigger than that. Like everything has kind of died back now. So, but they can like get a little bigger. But they're kind of end up being distinct plants. Like you can pull one out and get its roots, like clover, which is kind of like spreads like a grass. It'd be hard to really pull a single plant out. You know. Any other questions about wood sorrel?
No, it sounds cool.
Yeah, keep your eye out for it. It's around. I mean, I think in New York City.
Is it cultivated anywhere, or is it just naturally growing in most?
I think from what I think the stuff that people eat is, I don't think people try to cultivate it, but the cultivated stuff are like the bigger oxalises that are used as ornamental plants. You see those cultivated, but I don't heard of anyone cultivating wood sorrel for any commercial purposes. I don't know why not, but it's weird what we choose to cultivate and not.
Oh, another cool way to use it might be like drying it and mix it with a salt, and so you can make like a lemon salt, but like a wood sorrel salt that you can use on foods.
That's an interesting idea. I think that would work because I think unlike certain herbs, it probably will keep a lot of that flavor even dried because the oxalic acid I don't think will break down, right? It would probably still be there. So it probably handles a lot of cooking or drying or things like that. Yeah. Well, it's gonna have to be next year because I don't think. Well, I think it's a plant that can have a little resurgence in the fall when things cool down, perhaps.
Okay.
But I think mostly it's a spring thing, so I'll have to keep an eye out and I need to do more with it. This year I really kind of didn't do as much of foraging as I'd hoped. So next year I'll have to give it a try.
Sounds cool.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me on this episode of Rootbound. Hooray. Bye, Muggsy.
Bye.
Well, that was a really great chat with Anwesha about Ranunculus and Wood Sorrel. And how about a little bit of vocabulary here at the end of the show? Now, one thing I think I mentioned briefly, but maybe didn't get into, is that wood sorrel at nighttime, the leaves fold up. And in the daytime, they unfurl. And that kind of particular movement, when a plant does that, is called nyctinasty. And here's the definition from Wikipedia. Nyctinasty is the circadian rhythm-based nastic movement of higher plants in response to the onset of darkness. It's kind of like sleeping for plants. Just to quickly define nastic movement, nastic movements are non-directional responses to stimuli such as temperature, humidity, or light. And nyctinasty is specifically the ones related to the change in light from night to day. And so wood sorrel is a nyctinastic plant, and there's some other ones out there. Actually, I talked about the mimosa tree, which is actually the Persian silk tree. Its leaves do that as well. And there's probably some other common ones out there that I'm not thinking of. But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing to see a plant move in like relatively fast time frame in response to that stimuli. And it's like they're taking a little snooze. So that's cute. I think that's all I have to say for this episode of Rootbound. Thank you for joining me, and I will speak with you on the next episode. My guest on this episode of Rootbound was Anwesha Banerjee. Anwesha is a really great friend who's got an awesome rooftop garden, and you can hear her on a few other episodes of the show, including episode 6, this first spring episode, and the first winter episode. So check those out. If you like Rootbound and you want to help support the show, visit rootboundpodcast.com/support to learn how you can do that, including supporting the show on Patreon. Rootbound is hosted by a guy who might make you eat a weed, Steve Ellington. Music by Christian Krikascota. Fake ads by David Lonnie. Rootbound is a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside, but if you can go outside, beware the ranunculus.
Conifers, they're unforgettable!